until we took it away. Donald Trump has no objection to seeing Confederate flags in the Confederate states that waged war against the United States of America and killed more Americans than the Mexican army ever could have in our war with Mexico. Donald Trump wants to honor the most treasonous people who have ever lived in this country. Donald Trump spoke at Fort Bragg today, an Army base whose name was changed in the Biden administration when someone finally realized that naming American Army bases after generals who committed treason and killed American soldiers is not the best idea. General Braxton Bragg was a Confederate general who committed treason and killed as many Americans as he possibly could while committing that treason during the Civil War. And Donald Trump restored the name Bragg to that fort to honor the committing of treason and the murdering of American soldiers.
For a little breaking news, we are also going to be restoring the names to Fort Pickett, Fort Hood, Fort Gordon, Fort Rucker, Fort Polk, Fort A.P. Hill, and Fort Robert E. Lee.
That's how much he cares about law and order. All of those forts used to be named after all of those Confederate generals, all of whom committed treason against the United States and murdered American soldiers. And Donald Trump wants to restore those names. You just heard Donald Trump honoring that murderous, treasonous general, Robert E. Lee. That is the same Robert E. Lee who became the Confederate leader dedicated to killing American soldiers. It is the same Robert E. Lee who committed treason the first day of the Civil War by joining the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee cannot be forgiven as a man of his time who simply missed the moral dimensions of what was happening because no one in his Virginia circle saw the moral dimensions the way we do now. How then do we explain Robert E. Lee's sister, who sided with the North in the Civil War and whose son joined the Union Army, or Robert E. Lee's nephew who joined the Union Army? And what about 40% of Virginia's officers who remained in the service of the Union Army? Robert E. Lee owned slaves, beat slaves, and sold individual members of slave families to different buyers. Robert E. Lee did every vile thing that slave owners did at that time when honorable and decent people around the world knew that slavery was evil. No one in American history has been more guilty of treason than Robert E. Lee. In an 1865 editorial in the New York Times, it said, Robert E. Lee has levied war against the United States more strenuously than any other man in the land, and thereby has been guilty of the crime of treason as defined in the Constitution of the United States. And 3 days later, Robert E. Lee was indicted for treason, but generals are especially generous to generals, and General Ulysses S. Grant interceded with President Andrew Johnson to get the treason case against Robert E. Lee dropped. Robert E. Lee killed more American soldiers than Hitler did. And Donald Trump wants to honor him. Donald Trump today told an audience of American soldiers that he wants to honor Robert E. Lee with, quote, Fort Robert E. Lee.